There are places in this world, vast and silent, that hold our deepest secrets. Deserts, in particular, have always been keepers of the unknown. They are landscapes of immense emptiness, where the veil between what we know and what we feel seems impossibly thin. For generations, we've used these empty quarters to hide things, to build things, to test the very limits of our own ingenuity and sometimes our own hubris. Out here, under a blanket of a billion stars, far from the prying eyes of the world, we push the boundaries of technology, of warfare, and perhaps of reality itself. And it is in these isolated pockets of Earth, on the fringes of our maps, where stories are born. Stories that defy easy explanation. Stories that are whispered in hushed tones by men and women who have signed their names to secrecy, but whose eyes have seen things they were never meant to speak of. This story is not about one specific, named place you can find on a commercial map. It's not about Area 51 or Groom Lake, though the mythology of those places casts a long shadow over this account. This is about an incident, or rather, a series of incidents that echo events reported by credible witnesses at some of our most secure and clandestine military installations. From the high desert of Nevada to the rugged mountains of New Mexico, personnel have reported phenomena that challenge our understanding of the world. It's a story pieced together from overlapping accounts, from declassified reports, and from the quiet testimony of those who were there on a night when the impenetrable darkness of the desert was broken by a light that behaved like nothing on Earth. The Nevada Test and Training Range is a sprawling, unforgiving territory, a kingdom of restricted airspace and classified operations. It is a place where the official story is often just a cover for a dozen other, deeper truths. Within this massive complex are numerous installations operating under layers of compartmentalized secrecy. On a clear, cold night in the late 1990s, at a remote surveillance outpost designated only by a number, two young airmen sat watching their monitors. Their job was monotonous, a cyclical routine of observing empty desert and empty sky through high-powered optics. The silence of their post was absolute, broken only by the low hum of electronics and the occasional crackle of the radio. For hours, nothing had happened. The night was proceeding exactly as 100 nights before it had. But then, something changed. On one of the monitors, a pinprick of light appeared in the sky. It wasn't a star, it was too bright, too definite. It wasn't a conventional aircraft. There was no sound, no navigation strobes, just a silent, steady luminescence. The airman watching the screen leaned forward, his fatigue vanishing in an instant. He called to his partner, his voice a tense whisper that cut through the sterile quiet of the room. "Hey, you seeing this?" The light just hung there, impossibly still, in a sector of airspace that was supposed to be completely sterile. According to their logs, nothing was scheduled to be in the air that night. No training exercises, no test flights, nothing. For several long minutes, the two men watched, trying to rationalize what they were seeing. A weather balloon? A satellite catching the last rays of a long-set sun? But it was too low for a satellite, and it was perfectly stationary, defying the high-altitude winds. Then, as if responding to their unspoken thoughts, the light began to move. But its movement was all wrong. It didn't accelerate in a way they understood. It moved with a velocity and a precision that was utterly alien to their experience as airmen. It shot across the sky, stopped on a dime, and then changed direction at an angle so acute it would have torn any known aircraft and any pilot inside it to pieces. They were trained observers, familiar with every piece of advanced technology in the U.S. arsenal, from stealth fighters to experimental drones. What they were witnessing was not one of ours. This was a sentiment echoed decades later by high-ranking officials who spoke of repeated instances of unknown craft operating over restricted nuclear facilities, stating plainly, "It's not ours." The senior airman grabbed the radio handset, his voice strained as he reported the incursion up the chain of command. The response from range control was initially dismissive, colored with the weary assumption that they were just a couple of green kids spooked by a meteor or an atmospheric anomaly. But the men in the tower were adamant. What they were seeing was real, it was solid, and it was under intelligent control. And then, the situation escalated. As they tracked the single light, another appeared, and then another, until a formation of 5 lights hung silently in the sky, arranged in a perfect, unwavering geometric pattern. Back in the Nevada desert, the silent formation of lights held its position for what felt like an eternity. The initial disbelief in the control had given way to a palpable tension. This was no longer an anomaly. It was an unauthorized intrusion into some of the most restricted airspace on the planet. And then, the lights did something that sent a chill down the spine of everyone watching. In perfect unison, as if they were a single entity, all 5 lights began to descend, slowly and deliberately, toward the ground. They weren't heading for the main runway or a designated landing pad. They were moving towards a section of the base that didn't officially exist on most maps. A cluster of nondescript structures far out on the range, a place whispered about but never openly discussed. As the lights descended, a strange energy filled the air. The electronics in the tower began to flicker. The radio transmissions became distorted, filled with static and an unnerving low-frequency hum. The on-screen displays from the tracking cameras began to glitch, the telemetry, data freezing and then disappearing altogether. It was as if the very presence of these objects was warping the technology designed to observe them. The airmen could only watch, helpless, as the formation dropped below the radar horizon, disappearing behind a low ridge. For a moment, there was nothing. The desert was plunged back into darkness. The silence returned, deeper and more unsettling than before. And then, the ground itself began to glow. A diffused, pulsating light emanated from beyond the ridge, casting the eerie silhouettes of the distant mountains into sharp relief. It was a cold, blue-white light, anything produced by conventional flares or floodlights. It bathed the landscape in a spectral ambience, a silent and profound announcement that something truly unknown was now unfolding in the heart of that secret base. The men in the tower didn't know what they were witnessing, but they understood one thing with absolute certainty. They were not alone. And whatever was out there in the darkness was not from their world. The official report filed the next morning would be heavily redacted. The video evidence would be classified at a level far beyond their clearance. The event would be officially explained away as a confluence of atmospheric plasma and a misidentified training exercise. But for the men who saw it, felt that deep, resonant hum in their bones and watched the desert floor glow with an otherworldly light, the official story would forever be a lie. They knew what they saw, and the memory of that strange light hanging in the sky above a place that wasn't supposed to exist would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hashtag the aftermath. For months after the incident, 2 airmen were reassigned, their records quietly sealed. The footage they captured vanished into classified archives, never to be seen again. But the story didn't end that night, because 2 weeks later, something else happened, something that couldn't be explained away so easily. On a nearby testing range, seismic sensors began to pick up rhythmic tremors beneath the desert floor. Not earthquakes, not explosions. These were patterned, pulsing almost like a code. Whatever had landed or appeared that night hadn't simply disappeared. It had gone underground. Contractors stationed near the restricted perimeter started reporting strange phenomena. Low-frequency vibrations at night, tools and vehicles malfunctioning, and radios picking up distorted voices that weren't on any channel. One technician described hearing what sounded like metal bending under pressure, coming from deep beneath the sand. He said it would happen just before dawn, always in the same direction, toward the site of the light descent. Then came the blackout. One morning, the entire base lost power for 7 minutes. Every generator failed simultaneously. Surveillance feeds went dark. When systems came back online, all hard drives had been automatically wiped, and the backup servers stored offsite were found magnetically corrupted. Officially, the cause was an electrical surge caused by static discharge. But internal reports tell a different story. Several personnel claim to have seen a faint, blue luminescence rising from the desert during the outage, the same light seen that night. In the months that followed, unexplained radar reflections appeared intermittently over the range. Objects with no transponder codes. Objects that appeared at 30,000 feet, then dropped to ground level in under a second, vanishing completely. Attempts to scramble interceptors were repeatedly denied by command, citing exercise protocol. And then the silence. One by one, those who witnessed the event were transferred, discharged, or reassigned overseas. The tower where the 2 airmen worked was decommissioned and dismantled. Officially, it never existed, but locals say the lights still return every few years, always in the same pattern, always in silence, the signal beneath the desert. Months after the Nevada incident was officially closed, the classified report was sealed, buried under multiple levels of restricted access. But like all secrets, pieces began to leak. In early 2001, an anonymous envelope was sent to a journalist in Albuquerque. Inside was a cassette tape labeled only with a date, December 12, 1998. Alongside it, a single, typewritten page, recovered telemetry, do not amplify the signal. Experts who analyzed the recording found it wasn't random noise. The pattern repeated at precise intervals, 7.83 Hz, the same frequency as the Earth's natural electromagnetic resonance, known as the Schumann frequency. But this signal wasn't coming from the atmosphere. It was coming from below the desert floor. Cross-referencing seismic and electromagnetic data from that night revealed something chilling. At the exact moment those 5 lights appeared, instruments across the southwest recorded synchronized pulses from underground, spaced evenly as though marking coordinates. 5 pulses, 5 locations, all in a perfect geometric alignment. And at the center of that alignment was the unnamed base. Whatever descended that night wasn't random. It was deliberate, coordinated, almost as if something had been responding to a signal transmitted from Earth itself. Declassified memos obtained years later suggest that a black-budget research project, codenamed Echo Glass, had been operating at that base during the time of the incident. Its stated purpose, testing high-frequency transmissions for subterranean imaging. But what the documents don't explain is why the experiment's frequency perfectly matched the one